Okay, welcome back. Our next session is going to be with Gina Scinta. She is a senior solutions architect with Thales. It's not Thales, it's actually Thales. And we are pleased to have her. She has over 30 years experience in cybersecurity. And let's bring her on. Gina, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Brad.
Terrific. Okay, the audience is yours. Take it away and we'll follow up with you in about 20 minutes with some questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you on a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. When he said over 30 years, I realized it made it, I sound really old, but let's say I just started at 10 years old, so then it doesn't sound so old. But really the new security reality in our space today is the fact that data is the perimeter. I have been in the business over 30 years, background in application and database development. And I came into the cybersecurity space 10 years ago because of my extensive knowledge of application and database environments. So that's why data is very near and dear to me. It really, the old school philosophy around security in an environment is perimeter security to wall off the data. But what we have found, especially in the past 5 or 6 years, where it's really been brought to the attention of consumers and people globally, is that the perimeter is no longer sufficient protection. Hackers are trying to access the perimeter, but not to say I accessed a perimeter. They're accessing the breaching the perimeter because they want to get to the most valuable asset within your organization, and that is your data. So the new reality of this is that perimeter security is failing to protect your data on your premise and in the cloud. And when you think about transitioning your data, transforming your data from your premise to the cloud, there is no perimeter. Because do you ever see any perimeters when you're up flying in a plane and you see those clouds? The perimeter is a non-issue anymore. Really, the focus should be around protection of the data, your most valuable asset within your organization. Our data threat report that we came out with in 2020 has reinforced that fact that data breaches continue to happen, and compliance is difficult, and we're continuing to find that it's a challenge to overcome those breaches. How do we go about doing that? We found that 26% of organizations admitted to having been breached in the past year. We've been monitoring this with our company for 5 or 6 years, and the number of breaches continue to increase year over year. Maybe the business vertical shifts, because when you look back 5 or 6 years ago with the Target, Home Depot, TJ Maxx breaches, those were all around retailers where they're trying to get your credit card information. In the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen that shift to more healthcare data or intellectual property, because there's value of that data selling it on the black market. In the survey that we did, 49% of global respondents have experienced a data breach. I'm sure every one of you on this conference today, either personally or professionally, have experienced a data breach. How many times have you received those letters in the mail or emails from companies that said, we have been a part of a data breach and now we're going to offer you data protection for your identity for X number of years? It's happened to me on numerous occasions. We also found in the data threat report that 47% of organizations have reported being breached and have failed to comply with an audit. We have found, and I found on a regular basis in working with my customers, that the number one reason for coming to us for looking at solutions for protecting their data is to meet compliance mandates. The number two reason is to mitigate risk. They don't want to be that next company you read about in the newspaper that has experienced a data breach. And we work with these customers on a daily, regular basis. The third reason is cloud security. They're moving to the cloud, you're moving your data workloads to the cloud, and now you don't have as much control over who has access and what's going on, who's managing the environment. So moving to the cloud, security is the #1 conversation with any customer we have when they talk about going to the cloud. And the fourth reason, and you really don't want to be in this category, is you have experienced a breach and now you need to retroactively protect it. And I have worked with customers that have been in that position. And trust me, you're better off to be proactive in this process than reactive. So let's take a look at our 3-step approach to providing digital security for your most valuable asset, your data and your identities. #1, we recommend to our customers to protect your data as it moves through your environment and wherever it is stored, and whether it's on your premise or in the cloud. Encryption and protection of the data is important. Whenever you talk about encryption, there is a conversation around encryption keys. And I tell customers that managing your encryption keys and protecting those keys is more important than the actually encrypted data. Because if somebody can get to your encryption keys and they can get to your data, they basically have unlocked the keys to the kingdom and can get to your data. So having strong centralized key management and storing those keys in a securely protected location is as utmost importance as encryption is. And third, when you're encrypting that data and creating those encryption keys around that encryption solution, the third most important part of that piece is controlling access to the data. You need to protect those identities and control the access, who has access and what type of access do they have. And this is protecting both the insider threat as well as the outsider threat. Next slide. Data is the perimeter. It is no longer sufficient to have perimeter protection. They're everywhere within your environment. You need to control that through storing encryption keys, protecting the data in transit. That's data going outside of your environment, encrypting the data in the cloud, and controlling the user access wherever that may be. The insider threat is greater than ever because anyone within the organization without the proper access controls around the data would be able to access that information. So encrypting and protecting the information, putting access controls around it is of the utmost importance. Where is the data? And this is usually where I start the conversation with any of my customers. How can you encrypt it if you don't know where it's at? And the level of effort to deploy an encryption solution is directly related to the level of security that you're trying to achieve. So if you look in the lower left-hand corner in the storage level, a lot of our technology partners that we work with, storage vendors out on the market today, offer encryption solutions for encrypting their storage, whether it's software defined encryption or whether it's self-encrypting drives. Those are great protection solutions if somebody's going to steal your storage device. Think about that storage device sitting in a lockdown data center somewhere. You don't see somebody walking in and taking a disk out of a storage array and walking away with it. The intent of self-encrypting drives is really to protect it when it's at rest, or if you're trying to securely transport a storage solution from one location to another. It encrypts everything. There are no access controls around it. When the storage device is powered on, it is now available for anybody to access that has access to the environment. If you move up the scale, virtual machines are a software-based solution. Anybody that has access could copy a virtual machine, store it on a thumb drive, go home and if it's VMware, put in VMware Workstation, and be able to look at everything that's on that virtual machine. If you're able to encrypt that virtual machine or encrypt the data that's sitting on that virtual machine, that information would be rendered useless. Moving up the scale at the file level, and as you see we go up the scale here, you have to know more about your data to know what you want to encrypt. Encrypting at the file level, there's a couple of ways to look at that. Unstructured data, whether it's PDFs, Excel, Word documents, PowerPoint, voice and video files, those are all intellectual property or sensitive information that you may retain about your organization or your customers. And being able to encrypt that data and put access controls around it becomes very important in protecting that information. Who has access? What type of access do they have? Encrypting at the database level. We haven't been collecting data in databases for over 30 or 40 years because it's not important. We have been collecting it because it is. And that's what everyone's after when they're trying to breach an organization's environment, to get to the data, whether it's unstructured or sitting in a database. And there's several ways to look at encryption from a database perspective. Do I want to leverage a database vendor's transparent database encryption solution? Or do I want to look at something where I have more control over the encryption and more control over the access for that solution? Or maybe do I want to encrypt something at the column level where, like a social security number and credit card being that most valuable asset, being able to protect that? But the only way to answer those questions as you go up the scale is how much you know about your data. And it's important to understand knowing your data and where your data lives in order to protect it. And that's a big part of that deployment effort that's related to encrypting the data and, applying security around it, is how well you know the data, not necessarily how long it's going to take to encrypt it. At the highest level of data protection is encrypting at the application layer, where you have the ability to embed encryption APIs at the application so that the point of entry of that data, whether it's structured or unstructured, it's all encrypted, so that wherever it ends up, whether it's a database, on a file, on a virtual machine, or in storage, it's all encrypted. And that's what we call data in transit, where you've encrypted it at the highest point of entry for protecting it all the way through the environment. So how do we go about doing that and providing a modern data security solution in a zero trust world? Well, I've talked a lot about data, and what I found with my customers is that how do they know where that data is at, where that sensitive data is that I need to get to? So how do we do that? Number one, we need to discover where the sensitive data is at. And having a tool to be able to do that will enable us to make that process of discovering the data and encrypting the data, reducing that deployment effort significantly. So first of all, we have to discover where the sensitive data is at. And that sensitive data, how you determine that is based on what compliance mandates you have to meet or what type of risk you're trying to mitigate, to knowing what to protect. Is it personally identifiable information? Is it payment card industry sensitive information? Is it healthcare HIPAA related information? That's what you need to know. Or you're trying to meet a compliance mandate like GDPR. Those types of information that you have will help us guide you in how to encrypt and protect the information. Once you've discovered that, encrypting it is a piece of cake. Then from there, providing secure and strong centralized key management around that has now created a very strong security posture for data protection of your environment. And then also controlling the user access. If I'm an administrator of an environment, whether it's a DBA or a server administrator, I don't need to see that sensitive information. I just need to be able to have the privileges necessary to do my job as an administrator, and seeing that data is not necessarily a part of my job. If you want more information about the data threat report, you can go visit our website, cpl.thalesgroup.com/data-threat-report, and you'll get the access to the 2020 data threat report with the findings that we've collected from interviewing over 1,600 individuals within our customer base and across the globe about their security risks and what they've experienced. How can we, as Thales Cloud Protection and Licensing Business Unit, help you to protect your data? And notice data is used a lot. If this was a drinking game, I can tell you you'd had a lot of shots by now. But quite frankly, data is a serious conversation. Where does the data live? How do I want to protect that data? Is it stored in big data solutions where I've done analytics on that and I want to secure the analytics around it? Do I want to tokenize that data to meet payment card industry compliance, where maybe I want to tokenize a credit card number? Or do I want to do data masking? I have a customer I'm working with right now that wants to mask the data, the production data, so that when it gets moved down to the lower environments in test and dev, those test and developers don't have access to the sensitive data, but can do their testing and development against real live data, but without seeing that sensitive information. Does the data live in unstructured files sitting on servers or storage devices on your premise or in the cloud? Do I want to encrypt database data sitting in databases on premise or in the cloud? Or application level encryption? Do I really want to put the strongest controls around protection of the data at the point of entry? Those solutions are all around what's called data at rest encryption, where I'm protecting that data where it rests, where it sits, whether it's storage on a virtual machine, on a file, or a database. Then when you start talking about moving to the cloud, how do I provide the best solutions for doing encryption and key management in the cloud? Whether it's with bring your own key, hold your own key, or bring your own encryption. All of these solutions that I've just talked about are encompassed in our portfolio that we have just recently rebranded called the CipherTrust Data Security Platform. It's a combination of our CipherTrust Manager centralized key management and a variety of solutions to help you with discovering your data, classifying the data, remediating it through transparent encryption, or being able to apply tokenization, or even doing application level encryption. But also we work with a large number of technology partners that leverage our key manager as a storage place for their encryption keys, for their encryption solutions. And we do that via a protocol called KMIP, which is the Key Management Interoperability Protocol. So we're able to store their encryption keys on our centralized key manager external to their encryption solutions. Now, if you move a little further over to the right, when you start getting into public key infrastructure, digital signing, timestamping, and TLS and SSL private key protection, that's where our general purpose HSMs come into play. We are the #1 vendor in this cybersecurity space for our hardware security modules. The SafeNet Luna 7 platform is our network attached HSM, and we have those deployed globally throughout the world, protecting keys and identities throughout over 400 integrations with our technology partners. We've also introduced in the past, I think 2 or 3 years ago, our data protection on demand service, which is our hardware security modules in our data centers, excuse me, offering HSM as a service. So if you don't want to deploy a hardware appliance in a data center, or you don't even have a data center to put an appliance in, our data protection on demand can offer you that solution for protecting those keys for different types of use cases that HSMs provide. We also have a special purpose-built HSM for the payments industry space. That's our PayShield 10K. It's purpose-built for managing payments, and it is the leading provider. We are the leading provider of payment HSMs as well. I've talked about protecting the data at rest, protecting data in the cloud, and protecting those high-value keys. But let's talk about data in motion. That data that's going out over the wire is just as susceptible to being stolen and breached as if someone were to breach your perimeter and get to your data that's sitting on your premise. I used to have a demo I did at trade shows that showed how we could tap fiber and show you where somebody could steal your data over the wire. But by turning on our high-speed network encryptors, we were able to scramble that information and prevent anybody from being able to access that data over the wire. Of the 30 years I've been in the industry, I would say 25 of those was in the federal space, where our high-speed network encryption was heavily used in our DoD, our Department of Defense, to secure communications globally. We've seen a lot of activity in that space on the commercial side in the past 4 or 5 years with some of our very large customers that you all do business with on a regular basis that are looking to protect their communications and especially their intellectual property as they communicate over the wire, whether it's point-to-point, point-to-multipoint, or in a fully meshed architecture, whether it's data center to data center, data center to branch office, or data center to headquarters. So as you can see from our portfolio, we have the broadest range of encryption and protection solutions on the market today. There's a lot of vendors out there that can do bits and pieces of this, but Thales brings to you a portfolio of encryption, key management, protection solutions, both at rest and in motion. And now, any questions?
Hey, we have quite a few questions.
Awesome.
All right. Let's take a look. Or here's a one that could probably address small businesses and nonprofits. This is from Carmen, and she asks, how can a nonprofit organization afford to keep the data it collects about its clients secure and safe if they could barely have the funding to operate? Is there some avenue that nonprofits can take to avoid or head off data breaches? So is there a nonprofit pricing, perhaps?
As a solutions architect, I prefer not to talk about pricing. I prefer to help you solve your problem. I am actually working with a nonprofit right now who is looking to do exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
Our encryption solutions, we have virtual software key managers, a lot more affordable than if you were to invest in a hardware appliance. And depending on what you're trying to protect, how many servers you're trying to protect or what the data is you're protecting, we can offer a solution that can help you with that. We also offer subscription pricing, which is a lot more affordable as well.
Right. Well, I'll just let Carmen know, who asked that question, visit the virtual booth of Thales.
Yes, I will be there all day. So come and chat with me.
Then you could speak to her or her sales engineers. All right. Does Thales Solutions replace a typical DLP solution like Symantec or McAfee?
No, we are not a data loss prevention solution. We are encryption and key management.
Mm-hmm.
And how we enable you to do that is with one of our newest features is leveraging our data discovery and classification, where we can help you find where that sensitive data is so we can protect it.
Okay.
Good question.
Yep, there's another one from Darren. Doesn't the encryption of all internal data not hamper scanning? Part two, if decryption happens at each scanning point, doesn't that use time and energy?
So yeah, there are some costs with encryption. And I'm not sure exactly what scanning you might be referring to, but yeah, so when we do the encryption of the data, we can also allow for what we call a process or an application to have access to the encrypted information to enable them to do their job. So if you have a scanning application and you want to allow it to have access to the encrypted data, then you would allow that application to have the necessary encryption or the decrypting processes they need in order to do their scanning job.
Gotcha.
So they can leverage those for that.
I think you basically address that. If you can address how using encryption and key management can protect data in the cloud. So you kind of touched upon that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways about that. When you, a lot of it comes around the shared responsibility model that you have with a cloud service provider. The most control you have when you're leveraging infrastructure as a service with a cloud service provider, because they provide security they'll say from the concrete to the hypervisor level, and then you own that responsibility, everything from the hypervisor above the hypervisor to the data level. So you have the ability to do the encryption and wrap key management around that encryption in infrastructure as a service. When you start looking at platform as a service and software as a service, you as a consumer of those offerings lose some of that control, and a lot of that is built in by the service provider, where they provide the encryption solution and they provide the key management. In that case, you then have the ability to leverage the capability to what's called bring your own key. So you could leverage your own centralized key manager, whether it's on your premise or running in your infrastructure as a service part of your architecture of the cloud, to generate a key and then bring that key into that cloud service provider, where you then have the capabilities to provide the life cycle of the key, whether it's key rotation, key destruction, key revocation, So you control that. And we have an offering with our centralized key manager under CipherTrust Manager called CipherTrust Cloud Key Management that enables you to automate that process and have a single pane of glass where you can look at service, what you have going on with Bring Your Own Key with today we support Salesforce, Office 365, AWS, and Azure. Next on the plate will be IBM, and following that will be Google. So you'll be able to automate that process through a single pane of glass and bring your own key to software as a service and platform as a service.
Well, it looks like you're going to be busy for the next 5 to 10 years.
Hey, I have been super busy, so keep it coming. I love it.
When you were age 10, which is wonderful. So you were a child.
Well, that's, you know, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but,
All right,
you know.
Well, Gina, thank you so much for that very informative conversation. Gina, for all those people that are out there, is over 700 business leaders. If you want to talk to her or any of her technology sales engineers or experts, go ahead and visit the Thales booth in our virtual arena, where you can check out their solutions and 29 other solution providers and see what's best for your enterprise. Gina, thank you so much for joining us. And
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You got it. Of course, maybe we'll see you in 2021 when we go live again.
I would love that. I love seeing people in person and meeting with them to help them solve their problems, but virtual is just as good.
That's what we have to do these days. Well, thank you very much.
That's
Stay
right.
and
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. And for those people that are with us, as I said, now is the best time to visit the virtual exhibit area. And you'll also get a chance by visiting Gina's booth and everyone else's booth to win a $500 gift card from Amazon. So that's where we're all buying stuff from these days. So it's a great opportunity and a good giveaway. So we'll see you back here at the for panel 2 in about 15 minutes.